fear, lots of psychological stuff, good psychological stuff, not like, and here's the amygdala, and no, just basically how to make your life more awesome. That's generally what everything we do here at Asperger Experts is. So, just a few housekeeping things. We're on a 20-second or so delay, so if you ask a question, it's going to take us 20, or we're going to see it right away, but it's going to take us 20 seconds for you to see the response. We will be taking questions at the end, and beyond that, if you have any tech issues, then, well, you wouldn't be hearing this right now, so look below. Anyway, let's get started. Again, we're going to do questions at the end-ish. So, take it away.
All right, awesome. Let me just turn this, get the screen share on, open up my presentation here. All right. Can everybody see that all right? Is that good?
Yeah, we got it.
Perfect. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome to the other side of fear. I know how valuable your time is, and especially in the East Coast, a little late right now. So, time being the most valuable asset we have, I don't intend to waste it. I'm going to provide as much value as possible, and really, the promise is if you kind of embrace all the tools we're going to cover and some of the resources here, that you will get to the place you want to be. Because as Tony Robbins says, the defining factor for success is never resources. It's resourcefulness. And what is resourcefulness? It's about ability to master your mindset so you can create whatever you want despite circumstances that come in your way. And that's why psychology is so important. If you joined us a little bit early, Danny and me were talking about psychology and the value of it, because psychology is the study of the mind. And every great thing in the history of humanity, from the internet to the buildings in New York City just across the river from me, to the products you see all around you in the world, to the books, everything begins with a thought. The mind is your highest point of leverage. And that's why no matter what you want to do, whether it's sales, marketing, writing books, it's all about mastering the human psychology, mastering the mindset. Once you do that, anything is possible. Success and mastery begins with psychology. So we're going to start by talking about psychology and how it all works, how the brain works, and how we can master it. But the key thing to remember is that as much as insight we get from all this stuff we're going to talk about, insight plus action equals results. The number one thing that separates successful people from failures, and this is kind of what Tony Robbins says in some of his seminars, I've heard Jack Canfield talk about it as well, is action. Action is the number one thing. So no matter how much insight you have, you got to implement it. You got to put it
to do something.
Exactly. Thank you, Danny. You got to put it to use. You got to take action. And you do that and you get the results you want. So let's talk about what's in the way of getting those results. Because, as I said, action is the number one thing. But the thing is, people sometimes struggle with taking that action. And as Jim Rohn said, you can't hire someone else to do your push-ups for you. You got to do it yourself. That's the most important thing, is that people sometimes, they want to delegate certain actions. You just can't. Like Brendon Burchard said, that marketing is something in your business you got to embrace. In anywhere in life, you have to be willing to take the action and put the work in. And what makes it tough is sometimes there's going to be no end in sight. Yeah. This picture here was taken in Greenland. I spent a month skiing 350 miles across the second largest ice cap in the world. And pretty much for the entire month, all we could see was what you see in front of you. Not until the very last hour did we see the end of the end journey, the place we wanted to reach. And we weren't sure if we'd ever get there. We were stuck in storms for 5 days. A storm that actually killed somebody this year on the very same ice cap. So often, and that's kind of a metaphor for life, often that you won't know when and if you're going to get to that destination. But you just got to keep putting one step in front of the other. One step in front of the other, and the compound effect of those steps will get to the place where you want to go. So what makes it so hard for our mind to put that one foot in front of the other is because evolution has actually set us up for failure. Some of you may be reading this and thinking, what? We've been around for 2,000 years. How has evolution set us up for failure? And we're going to go more into that as we move on. But the reason I say this is that, when we're conditioned and we find ourselves blocked mentally from taking the actions we need to take to advance our life, sometimes it's not your fault that you are struggling with wherever you may be at. And this is not to sort of, give you an excuse to give us all an excuse to say it's not my fault. I can just, there's a reason why I'm here. It's evolution's fault. I'm going to explain more about it, but the key is to say that there's certain things that are outside your control. In order to regain that control, then we have the one power that we have is to focus and to choose where we focus our mind, focus our actions. As Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not an act, but a habit. And we're going to talk more about how to build those habits as we move through in this webinar. So before we do, I just want to briefly introduce myself. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about me, but I just want to introduce myself so you know who I am and why I may know some of this stuff about psychology. So this goofy dude you see up here was back when I was in high school. Actually, for a long time, for a year and a half, I wasted my life with drugs and alcohol. Two friends who started that journey with me are no longer alive today as a result of the degree to which we immersed ourselves in that self-destruction. And that's the person I used to be. But I managed to find a way out. I actually quit drugs almost overnight, which some say was challenging to do. And I'm not saying this to kind of toot my own horn or anything. I'm going to illustrate why I'm bringing this all up in a minute as well. But I managed to get out of that life. And since then, I joined the Marines. I served 6 years in Iraq. 6 years in the Marines, 1 tour in Iraq, which is that upper picture right there. I've started 2 businesses. I quit a corporate job to do the 1-month trip where I went across Greenland, which cost me $15,000. Came back from the trip almost broke, but started 2 businesses, and now I'm doing fairly well in my businesses. I've been ice climbing, scuba diving, caving, all kinds of things you can imagine to really push through fear and discover the value in it. We're going to talk more about emotions and how the value in every single one. But the point that I wanted to tell you and kind of telling you my story is that there's a lot of space to push through fear, and each time I've gone through it in some of the experiences you see in the pictures here, I've actually built more confidence in other areas of my life, and it translates to every area of my life. But without sort of boasting about me, I want to tell you a story about a woman who has done far more than I ever could, and who was one of the most amazing women I've ever encountered in my life. Her name is Barbara Arrowsmith Young. When she was born with an asymmetrical spine. She had scoliosis. She had speech problems. The part of her brain associated with speech wasn't functioning fully, so she had struggles with speaking. She had no spatial reasoning. So as a result of her inability to judge space, she would often hit things. At one point, she cracked her skull against a car because she ran into it. She wasn't aware of the distinction of where the car actually was. She had kinesthetic problems. She couldn't hold a cup in her left hand without spilling it. And worst of all, she had the part of her brain was that to understand relationships between symbols was not working properly. So she couldn't understand the difference between the words the father's brother and the brother's father. She wouldn't understand what that means. As a result, she also couldn't read a clock. So when she was about 28 years old, she read some research from an earliest neuroscientist who really discovered some of the topics we're going to be talking about as we move through this, Mark Rosenzweig. And she found that the brain can actually be changed. So she spent hours, days, and weeks toiling to the point of exhaustion with barely any time to sleep at mental exercises she designed to perfect her brain, to improve her brain. She would spend hours just looking at a clock and trying to figure out why the clock, if the small hand's at 2 and the big hand's at 9, why it equals 2:45. And she would just spend time over this. She had index cards with clock faces, and behind it what the answer of a clock was, what that time actually means. And in time, she actually changed the inner functioning of her brain. It's an amazing story, and the book actually she wrote is called The Woman Who Changed Her Brain. Now she's a more than fully functioning human being. She runs an institute called the Arrowsmith Institute. She's written books. She's a public speaker. I'm pretty sure she's on TED Talk. It's an absolutely amazing story of how anybody can do anything with the power of the brain. So with that, let's look at how the brain works. And I'm not going to go deep into the sort of science of all the systems, but we're just going to go really brief into the 3 brains. There's the reptilian brain, which you can see there. That's where kind of the amygdala, that's the fear center, where all fear starts from. And then you have the emotional brain, which in this picture is labeled as the limbic system. And then you have the neocortex, which is the human brain. That's where we get our greatest strength. That's our ability to rationalize, to reason, for abstract thought, for imagination. That's where we really have that power. Now, being that all experience of life is first processed through the reptilian brain. It goes through in the bottom, through your spinal cord, and any stimulus goes through that. And if you've seen Danny's sensory funnel video, he kind of addresses this briefly too. He talks about that sensory gating, where with people with Asperger's, there's the gating is not functioning fully, so you have a lot more information coming in. Is that correct, Danny?
Yeah, the sensory filters aren't there, so we experience everything to a larger degree than everyone else.
Exactly. So that's where that sensory gating originates, in that reptilian brain, in that area of the brain associated with fear. But all processes of life start with fear, then they move to the emotional brain, and then before it gets to our human brain. And that's why the number one thing we really have that's in the way of our life is fear. But the issue is, so we're going to talk about how to kind of work our way through the fear brain and the emotional brain. And as I mentioned earlier, that with evolution has set us up a bit for failure, and we're really not in control of our brain as much as we'd like to think. The neuroscientist Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz, in alignment with a couple of other neuroscientists in his research, one specifically was Dr. Benjamin Libet, found that we can't really decide what initially comes into our brain. That's just a functioning of how our brain works. That's our emotional brain in control. That's why habits exist, because sometimes you're not fully aware of what you're doing, but you just do them. So most of what comes through our brain, all those sort of negative thought patterns, the I'm not good enough, I'm too young to do this, I'm too old to this, all those little patterns, they're a product of your emotional brain that you're not in control of. And this is such an important realization. So I really want you to kind of really get this point, because the biggest mistake people make in trying to sort of push to success, and this is why only say 4% of the country right now are millionaires, and Jim Bunch said in one of his webinars, only 4% of people are really kind of achieve the success they want to get to, is because we try to resist what comes up into our brain. I do a lot of this work with my, sorry, go ahead, Danny.
That's a lot of Asperger's stuff. Is there's so much anxiety and there's so much fear that when the thoughts come in, they're scary, and we resist. But one of the key concepts we have here at Asperger Experts is that resistance causes resistance. So if we resist, either that's your thoughts, your child, the teacher, whatever it is, that's just going to cause more resistance. And then that just makes things kind of get worse.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a really great way you say that. I like that, resistance causes resistance, and that's so true, Danny. That's the mistake that a lot of people make, to resist their emotions. And the thing is, we're not in control of it, so we just have to accept it. I'm going to talk about a 5-step process to sort of to prevent resistance, and I call it the LMNOP method of breaking habits. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I just really wanted to hone in on this point that we're not as much in control of our emotional brain as we like to think. And the problem is, because we're not in control, the stuff that comes up is not often positive. And I'll explain why evolution has set us up for failure. If we're not in control, why can't it be that good stuff always comes into our brain? Why can't it be for all of us that says I'm the most successful person in the world or whatever, But it's not often the thing comes up. Reason being is primarily the reason being is because of what evolution has set us up for, called a negativity bias. What this says is, let me step back. I'm going to explain evolutionary how this was created. So let's look at archaic man, a hunter-gatherer man. He's going about his day, and let's say he misses out on a beautiful sunset or misses out on even a kill. No big deal. He can make it on the next day, right? Like he'll find a kill another day, or he may stop for a minute to check out the sunset the next day. He'll still live. But now let's say he misses out on the saber-toothed tiger around the corner. What happens? No more food, no more sunsets forever. As a result, that part of our brain, that emotional and reptilian brain that's conditioned from our evolution from way back when, has a focusing on the negative. And there's numerous studies that show people will actually be more unhappy about losing $50 than happy about saving it or gaining it. So there's many studies to kind of illustrate this concept. But it's a concept that I want you to get clear that, if you go through negative thought patterns, it's not your fault. We all go through it. It's a setup that we all have from emotion. The next reason why the negativity bias works in function with is the availability heuristic. What does this mean? What this says is that when an event is easier to recall, we form a belief that this event is a common experience of life. And the problem is, emotionally arousing events, the ones that trigger fear, the ones that trigger, like something that really kind of stimulates your emotion, actually activates the amygdala, and it causes the activated trigger to become rooted in memory. So essentially what that says is that all the trauma and all the bad stuff we experience in our life that triggers us emotionally, it starts to form a belief that life is like that. We don't form beliefs that life is like this, the good things that happen, because we get triggered more emotionally as a result of the negativity bias. So what that shapes is a pretty negative view of the world, and unfortunately most of us are conditioned that way. We really have to work to get out of it, and we're going to talk about some strategies to do that in a little bit. But that's kind of one of the setups that has us kind of set up for failure. The next one is what I call the plastic paradox. And I know Danny talks a lot about neuroplasticity in his work, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it as well. But what the plastic paradox is essentially states that it basically says that the fact that our brains are so plastic that we can actually change our brain, the problem is it also makes it really harder to change bad patterns. All the factors that make our brain easier to mold, it makes it easier to stick as well. To give you a metaphor, let me explain it this way. Imagine you're pushing a sled down a hill. You push it down once, there's not really a track. You can kind of move, you can move it right, left. The track doesn't really stick. But the more and more you push a sled down that very same track, it gets triggered, it gets stuck in that track. And then it's kind of harder to start down that track and get out of it. Now you got a couple of inches hole on that mountain in the snow that you're moving down. And that's what the plastic paradox is. Habits get ingrained, and the longer that you have them, the harder it is to get out of them. And the final way in which evolution has set us up for failure is because our mind is naturally programmed towards chaos. Sounds crazy, and it is. In one of the best-selling books, Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the author, writes that contrary to what we tend to assume, the normal state of the mind is chaos. And it's actually really interesting, because if you really look at how the brain works, in that prefrontal cortex area of the brain, it's updated 5 to 8 times a second. So you got a lot of activity. It's a turbulent mind that happens there. Now let's look at how this all works. Your mind is chaotic, it's turbulent. It'll naturally move towards negativity as a result of the negativity bias. And now you form a belief that this is how the world works from the availability heuristic, and that becomes ingrained in you as a result of the plastic paradox. So that's not really encouraging, is it? So let's talk about how to shift this. I just really want to set up this foundation because it's really important to know this. This kind of normalizes some of the things we all go through, right? So let's talk about how to shift it. Oh, sorry. Before I actually do, I want to actually just mention, apologies, forgot about this, a report I'm actually in the middle of creating. You're more than welcome to check it out if you want. It's existingliving.com/evolution. It goes a little bit more in depth about this. I didn't want to spend the whole webinar talking about this, but it's 7 ways that evolution is kind of against you and how to win that battle. In all kind of, just to be open, the report's not fully ready yet, but if you go out there, you can check it out. More than welcome to download it, and by next week, I'll have the report out to you. So kind of getting back to how the brain works. We talked about the evolutionary, the evolutionary flaws that are set up in us. So let's talk about the factors that actually shape our brain as well, and how we can use these factors to create, new habits and empowering habits in that drive towards success and overcoming fear, which is the root of all success and failures as well. So first we have Hebb's law. Hebb's law essentially states that the neurons that fire together wire together. What that means is, think about the sled metaphor again. If you do something long enough, you form neurological pathways in your brain, and that brain, it becomes more and more, you've got a thicker and thicker and thicker track, and that pathway is pretty strong. So that's what Hebb's law states. The next one is what I call the quantum Zeno effect. And what the quantum Zeno effect essentially states is that what we focus on, that focused attention, holds together and stabilizes brain circuits so they can wire together. So there's a lot of power in that, because now whatever we focus on allows Hebb's law to start working. It's a really powerful tool. We're going to talk a little bit about this in terms of overcoming fear. I'm going to have a 6-step methodology to overcoming fear. But essentially, this is a really thing I really want you to grasp this concept, that what you focus on, it stabilizes that activated area in your brain. It holds it in place long enough so that Hebb's law, the neurons that fire together, wire together, can take effect.
So,
sorry, go ahead, Danny.
What I'm getting from that, just to kind of explain from my perspective here, is that when you focus on something, then that becomes a permanent, well, at least semi-permanent part of your brain. So that becomes like a belief system, and that becomes a way that you think, and that becomes, this thing that is now more ingrained in your brain than otherwise would have been.
Exactly. That's perfectly put, Danny. And it's one of those things, because what it does, it actually activates areas of your brain that that whenever you start focusing on something, and those areas of your brain that are activated then start to, in time, you start building new neurological pathways, which actually leads to the third factor, which is one of the most important, is that the brain is plastic. Up until late old age, until the very moment we die, we can actually change how our brain functions. And this is a fairly recent concept, but it's such a valuable concept because, as I mentioned with Barbara Arrowsmith, when she discovered that, she actually changed her brain. And everybody has the power to do this. And when you combine the quantum Zeno effect with Hebb's law, you can change your brain and mold it to whatever you want it to be. It's really, really powerful stuff. So kind of going back to how I want to show you this picture again, because as I mentioned, all experience of life is first processed through that fear brain. So that's why fear is the most important thing to master, and that's why I've spent my whole life actually working on it. And I'm still, it's still a work in progress, but I'm still working on it because once we master that side of the brain, we have deeper access to our emotional brain and our human brain. So let's look at how to turn fear into fire, how to bring it that fuel to actually, to not resist fear, but to push through it. And as I mentioned, what me and Danny were talking about earlier, whenever fear comes up, you don't want to resist it. That's one of the biggest mistakes people have in kind of overcoming or handling fear, is trying to pretend like it's something to overcome or to resist or to make it go away. I've done a speech at a middle school where kids were thinking that they had this sort of false bravado that I'm not afraid of anything, as if having fear means you're a coward, and it certainly doesn't. Fear is actually a part of growth. I've had it my whole life, and I continue to have it, and that's how I am able to grow. And I'm sure Danny will be a testament to that as well.
Yeah.
So let's look at some of the first method. The first method you might have heard before. A lot of people are talking about it. It's kind of in The Secret and stuff like that, in the documentary The Secret, is visualization. And this is actually not just woo-woo, stuff like that. It's actually incredibly, incredibly powerful. The science behind visualization. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about a gentleman named Anatoly Sharansky. He was a Jewish computer specialist. He was falsely accused of spying for the United States, and he had to spend 9 years in a Russian prison. 400 days of that time was in solitary confinement. So in order to prevent his brain from from going insane, because what happens is, neuroplasticity, if you don't use your brain, it's called the principle of use it or lose it, that you kind of lose those brain maps. You lose that area of the brain, and that's what happens when you go insane. So he actually would mentally practice playing chess, just in his mind. He didn't have a chessboard, of course. He would just continuously mentally practice playing chess. And when he was released, the world champion, Garry Kasparov, came and played against the prime minister and leaders of the cabinet in his country, into Israel, and he beat all of them. This is the world champion. He beat all of them except Sharansky. That is truly an amazing story. I absolutely love it because Sharansky actually he became better at chess just by visualizing it, by practicing it in his mind. And there's so many studies of this. Russian gymnasts today, they found that the optimal training for their gymnasts was to do 75% visualization training, 25% physical training. They've actually done other studies where people improved, their muscles actually got stronger simply by mentally imagining themselves working out that muscle.
Yeah, one of my favorite studies in this, and this, what this proves is extraordinary, is they took 3 groups of basketball players, had them do free throws every day for an hour a day for a month, right? Measured them beforehand and afterwards. One group, they just had to do, 1 hour a day, like usual. One group, nothing, no practice. And one group, practice in their mind every day for an hour. And I don't remember the specific numbers, but obviously the group that didn't practice didn't improve.
Yeah, I know the numbers. That's a great study.
You have the numbers?
Yeah, I actually know the study. I quote the study a lot. So the group that did not practice had 0% improvement. The group that physically practiced had 24%. And the group that didn't touch a ball at all and only practiced mentally had 23% improvement. Almost the exact same as the ones that actually threw the ball in.
Yeah, so I use this all the time, daily. I'm constantly practicing social situations and thought patterns and stuff in my mind. And that's why people with Asperger's, you see all that intelligence there. That's because when we're in our mind all the time, and again, I talk about this in the sensory video. You can get that, by the way, at aspergerexperts.com. There's a little email box right there, and your name and email, and that's the first video. And it's on our YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/aspergerexperts. But anyway, so I totally lost what I was going to say. So I mentally practice this stuff all the time, and the reason why people with Asperger's are so much more intelligent is because they're in their own world, and in that own world, all they do is think about stuff. So they aren't being present in the world at all. They aren't experiencing world. They're just thinking about stuff 24/7 all day long. And that causes a lot. I mean, that's why you see such high intelligence in these people, is just because they have a lot more practice. And the mind does not know the difference between what it sees in reality and what it sees in the mind. So you can exploit that to play basketball in your head, play chess, work out, do whatever you want. And one of the tricks I do when I exercise and I have to like do something really hard is I'll visualize it in my head and then imagine a little stopwatch, like I have to do 60 seconds or something, right? I'll imagine a stopwatch go from 60 down to 0. And then from there, then I convince myself I've already done it. And because I've convinced myself I've already done it, now it's easy, even though I already haven't done it physically.
Yeah, I love that, Danny. That's a great exercise to practice. That's something I might take on myself. But I use this all the time too. Every morning before I wake up, once I wake up, I visualize the results I want. When I skied across the ice cap, I visualize myself skiing across Greenland. I literally imagine myself putting one step in front of the other, dragging a 190-pound sled. So I use this all the time too. It's really, really, really powerful stuff. And there's this whole science behind why. I mean, it actually works. It's not just woo-woo. So that's why vision boards are actually really cool. I have a vision board myself because it actually has you focus on that. It allows you to set yourself up to create the lifestyle you want to create. So I recommend kind of making one. I have one up on my living room, have one everywhere. Keeps me focused on what I want to create in my life.
There's one right above my head.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Likewise. So let's talk about some of the other kind of ways to overcome fear. When I say to overcome fear in this, let's look at in the context of fear. Let's say you're afraid of flying. Often people who are afraid of flying, and Jack Canfield has actually a great story about this, they visualize the plane crashing. So obviously they're afraid. All you got to do is reframe your fear, and I'm going to talk about reframing in a minute, to visualizing yourself, walking off the plane, walking off the airport, meeting your loved ones on the other side. And it'll shift your whole way you approach getting on the plane and sitting on the plane. Jack actually did this with the lady on a plane, and he managed to shift her whole sort of her body sensations, her thoughts, her feelings. It's really cool stuff. So that's how you can kind of use it to transform your, to embrace fear and move through it. So one of the other strategies to overcome or at least I don't like the word overcome fear because it implies that fear is something to be overcome, and it's really not. It's something to push through. As long as you keep growing in your life, fear will always be part of the journey. It still is in my life. As I'm writing a book, I'm terrified. It's always part of the life. So I think it's a natural thing. So anyway, so to look at how we can move through it, a strategy I call preemptive strikes. Let me explain what this means. What preemptive strikes are is to set like a very specific plan of action on what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, before the actual desired action is needed to take place. I'll explain a study that they did where they had a bunch of elderly patients who had just recovered from hip and knee surgery. They split them into two groups. They had one group write down exactly when and what time and how long they would spend doing things like taking a bath or just standing up on their own. The other group, they just encouraged them to do so. The group that used the preemptive strikes model and actually like planning every step of the detail, they were bathing on their own in 3 weeks as opposed to the other group in 7. The group that was told to use preemptive strikes was standing on their own in 3.5 weeks, and the other group did it in 7.7 weeks. The point, and there's again numerous studies that show this. They've done it with students who in the studying patterns to show if you plan it ahead of time, you'll actually study more. So whatever you want to do in your life, plan it out to a T. And the key thing is you don't want to give your brain too many options because your conscious brain is very lazy. The human brain is all of us. It's not just you. Our conscious brain is very lazy, and Nobel Prize-winning best-selling author Daniel Kahneman talks about it in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. You can kind of go more into it, but just to give you a brief overview. The conscious brain is lazy, so if you give it choices, it won't choose one, and you will just end up doing nothing. This is why many people don't kind of move forward. It's because they're not very clear on what they want to create. So preemptive strikes is about getting very clear what to create, writing it down, planning it to a T, and you actually find it much easier to then go about taking that action. The next step is practicing curiosity and gratitude. Now, what does this have to do with fear? In the best-selling book, How to Convince Them in 90 Seconds, Nicholas Boothman talks about how curiosity is one of the most powerful states you can have in terms of like growth and as a human being. Because Curiosity, it shifts it from judgment. It shifts your perspective from, oh, how everything might go to hell. You know, that's what fear creates. Like, why would I start my business if it's going to fail? Actually be curious. Okay, what could happen? What could go wrong? What could go right? And you'll start noticing a different shift in your being. You'll actually your states will actually really create. Anytime I notice myself judging something, I'll actually shift. Okay, what can I be curious about this person instead of judging them? So it really shifts your whole perspective on life. And gratitude is just incredibly powerful because it starts conditioning out that negativity bias. You know, instead of focusing on what we don't have, we start looking at what we do have. And again, one of the researchers, Dr. Martin Seligman, he talks about in his book where he actually did the study. He had participants in his study write down what they're grateful for every day for I think 3 to 6 months. At the end of the day, just write down what they're grateful for in the day. And you can actually take it to the next level and write down what you've accomplished that day, what you're happy for. Really kind of start conditioning a positive mindset. And they noticed a significant improvement in quality of life, even for people diagnosed with depression. So this starts to actually shift those neurological pathways, and you will start shifting yourself out of that fear block and into a place of possibility and all the great things you want to do in your life. It's a really, really powerful tool. I do this every day myself.
I totally use gratitude all the time, and curiosity as well. So I'm actually going to start using curiosity more after hearing that. But with gratitude, whenever I'm in an anxious or fearful or overwhelmed or something state like that that's negative, if I start thinking what I'm grateful for, it immediately shifts that to what I'm grateful for. And then because of that, the anxiety and what I'm grateful for cannot exist in the same space. Therefore, the anxiety or fear, whatever, goes away. And suddenly I'm just filled with gratitude.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. And I'm actually going to talk about a study that validates that in a minute.
Cool.
Because all these studies are really cool. So I love the way you describe that. I'm going to talk about what the science behind why that works and what that does. So kind of we'll move on to the next step is to actually anchoring. Anchoring confidence. Danny kind of addresses this in his sensory funnel video where he talks about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, but you talk about how to kind of keep putting yourself in situations that potentially, strike up that fear and building that anchor, like start kind of conditioning confidence. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So what anchoring does is in any area of life, you can actually look back on your life. So what I do is I'll look back on a period of my life where I was very successful. Let's say crossing an ice cap, joining the Marines, whatever it may be. And then I'll focus on that period. And again, like we were talking about, what you practice to imagine in your mind is very real. It actually will shape your mind, it'll shape your muscles, all of that. And then I anchor that in. So what I can do is what I like to do is I clench my fist really strong into like a powerful motion. So every time I do that now, that clenching fist starts to get associated with that state of confidence. So you can anchor that in. So next time you find yourself in a place of fear, you just trigger the anchor. So I clench my fist, and now all of a sudden my brain is bringing up all those positive moments where I pushed through fear and found confidence. Does that make sense, Danny?
I use that exact trick all the time.
Cool.
I have
that's
sorts
really
of
powerful stuff.
fun anchors for all sorts of various things. And the cool thing is, you can generate any emotion at any time. And once you learn that and apply it with anchors, then you can suddenly be like, okay, I'm happy. And this isn't just me saying I've decided I'm going to act happy for the webinar people. Like, there's a little change here now. I can go really depressed, too, and just be like, this just sucks right now. Or I can go right back to happy and just be like, yeah, life is awesome. And this is genuine. This is just knowing how to trigger that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of want to echo your what that statement. There's a whole bunch of research on how your body language actually changes your brain as well. So as much as you can kind of mentally change your state, you can physically change your emotional state as well. In Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink, I think he talks about how they did studies where the physical act of smiling, they had people who were depressed actually
I love that study.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Just smiling over and over again for days, and they actually stopped being depressed.
Yeah.
Try smiling and being sad at the same time. It's near impossible.
It was like 80, I think it was upwards of 80% of the people involved in the study was smiling in front of a mirror for like 30 minutes a day. And like 80% of the people that were severely depressed cured their depression just by going for like half an hour a day.
Exactly. It's awesome. I mean, your body can change your mind. Power of the mind is a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's why I love psychology. This is really cool stuff. That's a great study too. So kind of moving on from anchor, I addressed a little bit earlier about reframing. And what I mean by reframing, let me explain that a bit too. Often when we create fear in our brain, and we create any experience that's bad, like that experience has no meaning in and of itself. Every experience that we go through in life has no meaning. We assign meaning to it, and that meaning then shapes our perspective. It shapes our state. It shapes how we view life. One
Yeah.
of the greatest examples of this is Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust in Auschwitz. In the Holocaust, despite going through that horrific, horrific experience, he was able to find meaning from it. In his book, he talks about how those who found meaning from it, those who were able to get meaning from such suffering, were able to actually come out, better off in that experience as opposed to, traumatized or even killed or gave up on life, which many people did during that time. And that's what reframing is. It's shifting the meaning you associate to experiences. And when we talk about habits, I'm going to talk about a specific the five-step method on how to do that. But reframing is a very valuable concept because in a sense, a lot of these actually incorporate reframing, how to just shift your perspective. If you're scared of public speaking because you think it'll make you look stupid, reframe it. Say, okay, what else can I make this mean? I can make it mean that people will get value from my message. I can make it mean that I'm very confident, that I have something important to say. So you can reframe anything, and that's how you change your perspective on that thing. The next step is meditation. This is, again, might be too, not to get very spiritual or woo-woo, and I'm actually going to stop with meditation for a second and really get back into it later on and talk about the science behind it again. As you can see, a lot of what I do is really the science behind it. So it's not just talk. It's really validated by research. So I'm gonna come back to meditation, but something I wanted to address and stress upon because it has changed my life, and I'll talk about it more in a minute. But the final way is welcoming it. Is like Danny said in a sensory funnel video, actually go out and keep welcoming fear. Do things that scare you. You don't have to go do the scariest thing in the world right off the bat, but build that muscle, condition it. Take 1 inch outside your comfort zone, and every inch will give you more strength to take another inch, to take another inch, to take another inch. Eventually, you will have the confidence to keep doing anything. And the best part about this is that fear will always be present. So as long as you keep trying something new, fear will come up. But now you've built that muscle for courage. You've conditioned it. So do things that scare you on a regular basis. Make it a habit. As I mentioned earlier, this is such an awesome quote, so I'll kind of intentionally bring it back, is that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not one single act, but it is a habit. So that's why we're going to talk about how to create habits. And this is the 5 steps. I know in sort of the webinar description there was 4 steps, but I actually decided to switch it and kind of make 1 step into 2 in service of really breaking down this process a little more. So I call it the LMNOP method. So the very first step is when you're going through a moment, let's say you have a bad habit. I'm going to actually give you an example while I go through this of one of the people I was working with. So he had an issue where every time he started getting to work, say writing down on his computer, he was a writer. Every time he found himself writing, he would actually find himself had physical experiences, anxiety in the stomach, and like a real physical reaction to the act of writing, or to the act of doing anything really. So inevitably he would venture off and go sit down on the bed, watch TV, and relax. And so what happened? The more he did that, the more he built that pathway. And TV becomes this is why TV is so popular, because it's a very easy way to quiet our chaotic brain. It doesn't require any psychic or emotional or mental or even physical effort. So TV is great, right? It silences the chaotic brain. So this is what he did. So in our work together, I had him start labeling his emotion because he wasn't aware of it. In a study by the authors of Emotional Intelligence 2.0, they realized that only 36% of people are really aware of their emotions on a regular basis. Most of us aren't. If we had to kind of explain what emotion you're feeling right now, you probably won't really think about it, right? So we had him pause for a while. We had him actually go back and do the same pattern he was in. And while he was in it, label what he's experiencing. And in another study, Dr. Lieberman, excuse me, found that the act of labeling your emotions reduces the activity in your emotional brain, and it increases activity in that human brain. And it actually reduces that whole that fear center, all that triggers that leads to the physical reactions like anxiety and butterflies in your stomach and all that stuff. And it improves and increases activity in that area for brain-associated focus. Just that one act of labeling your emotion. So first you label it. Next you ask yourself, as I was talking about, what is the meaning that you associate that created this emotion? So I had him do this. What is the meaning? He would often realize that the meaning he's realizing is that, oh, I'm a failure. If I keep writing, people will just think it's garbage. This is why there's no point writing. So that's what he realized was the meaning he created. Then what the end step is realizing it's not you. It's your brain. And the key in this step is to separate yourself from your brain messages. You are not your brain. You are not your thoughts. You are not your feelings. You're not your beliefs. If you were, the entity of you would be changing regularly. Today I was sad at some point, happy at some point, angry at some point. Does that mean I as an entity change? No, I'm not my feelings. So the key is to separate yourself from that. So we'd have him actually say it to himself, this is not me, this is my brain. that I am not a bad person. I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a failure. This is just my brain coming up and telling me this. By doing this, he would immediately start centering himself and calming himself and realizing it's not him. It's just his bad brain messages. And the O step is to opt for a new meaning. So you actually consciously choose a new meaning. So what else can I make this mean? Ironically, this guy was very, very successful. He actually, he's a PhD. Obviously, I can't give out his name, but he had a PhD. He had worked for the Pentagon. He just wasn't realizing his successes. He was only focusing on his failures. So one of the exercises I had him do was actually write down all the successes and start realizing, hey, I've done some pretty cool things in my life, right? So by doing that, he'd start opting for a new meaning. So he would say, okay, the new meaning I can choose is that this is just my brain telling me I'm a failure, but really I can choose that I've done some pretty cool things, and I think people will get value from this writing, and I really like to write this so people can see it and get something valuable from it. So that's choosing a new meaning. And then finally, the P is your purpose. So you choose something else in line with your higher purpose. So what that means is now you actually choose to write instead of going off to where your brain pattern is taking you, right? Like you're on that sled going down the hill. Remember, you can't control the push off the hill. The sled's already been pushed. You can't control that. That's your emotional brain. Now you're in that pattern, so you actually have to like figure out a way to put a tree in that path. You know, forgive the metaphor, but I think you get where I'm saying. Put a tree in that path so you can veer off of it, kind of move off that tree, and then create a new path. So that new path is in line with your higher purpose, and that's really getting clarity on what you want to do. For him, it was helping the world through his writing and sharing all the knowledge he gained as a PhD in psychology, ironically. And here I was trying to help him. So, but that's what P is. And this 5-step method is not, I'm not saying it's easy. Especially initially, the more these patterns are ingrained, it is very, very hard to sit with it. You're going to immediately want to go to the old pattern. I actually went through this whole step in my own life when I was recovering from alcohol. I'll be honest with you. After I came back from Iraq, I struggled with some PTSD and alcohol. And by doing this, I actually managed to stop drinking on a regular basis because I would sit there. And at first, it was really hard. I would immediately go back to the bottle, right? So it takes time. It does take time. And that's why. Sorry, go ahead, Danny.
I agree. It totally takes time, and the key for me when I pretty much did this process. And by the way, well, let me mention this a second. But the key for me was the stronger that purpose is, the stronger that reason is, the easier the rest of it becomes. Because if you're just kind of like, well, I did this because some guy on the internet said I should, and it probably improved my life a little bit, and then it's not going to do anything. But if you go, I'm doing this because I want this and this and this, and I want to serve the world, and I want to do this, and here's what I want to do, and like literally my goals are super specific to the point where, okay, so one of my goals in the next few years is I'm going to move to Seattle, just because I really like Seattle. Obviously, I can't move to Seattle yet. So what do? I go to Seattle for the weekend and go check it out. And I make it, I'm like taking pictures in a specific way to make it so super clear where I'm going to live. I know the neighborhood that I'm going to live in. I know pretty much almost the address I'm going to live at.
Awesome.
And because of that, I have super specific reasons, and then that motivates me to do everything else. Now, if you're going, okay, my son with Asperger's, whatever, I have Asperger's, is just, I don't know what my purpose is. How do I find that? We teach that in life propulsion. So from an Asperger's point of view, we teach how to find what you're good at and how to find your purpose. I'm just butchering words all over the place. How to find what you're good at and how to find your purpose in life propulsion.
Yeah, that's awesome, and you couldn't be more. I mean, I totally agree. You need to be super specific on get clarity on what your life purpose is. Again, best-selling book, Simon Sinek. He talks.
I was literally just about to say, start with why. Is a great
exactly, book. Start with why. Totally. You got to know your why on this earth, and once you know that why, that'll be a driving force. The metaphor I like to use is, nobody's going to run into a burning building for no reason. But if you have your child or your significant other in the building, you would run into it, right, to save them. That's your why, and use that in every area of your life, not just when there's a fire. Yeah, exactly. So totally agree with Danny. That's awesome. And now to kind of go back to the L and M step, what makes it so hard of being aware is because we're not often practiced awareness. And this is why I'm going to bring it back to the secret to not just to productivity and anything in life to success is meditation. Jack Canfield actually attributes, best-selling author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, Success Principles, multi-millionaire. He says meditation is the #1 reason he is where he's at. That's how he came up with the book title Chicken Soup for the Soul. That's why he is where he is today, and he's extremely successful. So let's talk about the science behind it. In the research, in some research now, sorry, I almost forgot the name there. Dr. Andrew Newberg, he did MRI scans of people who like Buddhists who chant, Sikhs who meditate, the Sunnis who do their spiritual, I forget what their spiritual practice is, but he did the different people who practice spiritual, like in a sense of meditation or chanting or something like that, and he found that those people have greater activity, like a stronger activity in the areas of that human brain related to focus and awareness and ability to really focus on one thing at a time. That's what productivity is, right? So whereas others who didn't meditate did not have that. They had more greater activity in their emotional brain. So he then took it the next step, and he actually had a group of people practice 12 minutes of meditation a day for, I think it was about 8 weeks. And after the 8 weeks, even when their brain was at rest, he noticed a different scan in their brains than before they practiced that meditation. He did actually, again, building that brain muscle, just like Barbara Aerosmith did, just like Danny talks about in all his videos, is building that brain muscle. And meditation is a way to work out that muscle. It's like going to the gym for your mind. It really, really builds that muscle in a way that you cannot imagine. I personally, and I'm going to actually talk about 4 steps to do this, because I know meditation, there's so many different ways to do it. So let's talk about 4 ways to practice what I call stillness. One is actually just sitting with yourself and using breathing as an anchor. Because if you've never done this before and you actually try it, your brain is going to be wandering all over the place. And that's okay. Again, you don't want to resist it. When you focus on your breathing, that breathing provides you an anchor for you to kind of get back to. So let's say you're sitting down. You can take 4 breaths in, 4 breaths hold, 4 breaths out. Or just 4 breaths in, 4 breaths out. And just focus on that. Do it nice. I mean, when I say 4 breaths in, I mean 4 slow seconds where you're breathing in. So
I swear you're reading my mind, because I was literally about to say a good way to breathe is to do 4 seconds in and then 4 seconds hold and then out. So.
Exactly. And that actually physiologically changes your pattern. So if you're actually in a state of anxiety attack, that's why you probably heard a lot of people say, practice, slow down your breath, and it physiologically changes you. So one way to, this actually helps you anchor your mind to your breathing. So you breathe in slowly, breathe in out. That's one way to do it. Just sit down. If your mind wanders, keep bringing it back to your breathing. You can practice this for 10 minutes a day to start, 5 minutes, whatever, just to start building that muscle. Chanting is the thing I like to do. I've actually started doing this, and I find this the most valuable. Not to say that the other ways are wrong or right. I like chanting a lot. And there's different ways to do it. One way I do it is a way called Nichiren Buddhism, where you chant the words Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and you just chant that over and over again. And that becomes a chanting. That becomes your anchor, is chanting that words. But that vibration of the words, I find to be very powerful. So I like that. And it's a similar practice. Another way is to sit still and just be with your thoughts. So you're not focusing on your breathing, you're just actually just being with your thoughts. Letting them wander, letting them take you where it goes, and just noticing. You're not changing your thoughts, you're just noticing what comes up. And another way to do that is also actually notice in your body. So let's say you're watching TV, or even right now as you're listening to this. Notice what your body's doing. Like, be aware. Like, I notice right now I'm moving my hands a certain way. We're not often very conscious of that. We're just doing it. But when I start being aware of it, even when I walk sometimes, I'll actually practice noticing my feet hitting the ground and just being fully aware of your body. And what that does is building your awareness muscle. You can even do this while you're sitting down watching TV. Be aware of what is your fingers doing? What is your hands doing? What's your legs doing? Are you crossing your legs? And these 4 practices will start building that muscle. And in time, I mean, it's radically shifted my whole whole view on productivity and how I produce results in my own life. I used to do meditation, now I've shifted to chanting. If you have any more questions about that, Danny, feel free to ask Danny, or feel free to ask it at the end of this. Happy to answer, or you can even contact me offline. Any questions about chanting, I'll be happy to tell you how I do it, direct it on meditation. So I hope you've gotten as much value from this video, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed creating it. And if you did, I just want to tell you briefly about a program that I have that really expands on some of this stuff and really goes in depth into transforming your life and creating the lifestyle of your dreams. So I call it the Beyond Fear Coaching Program. In order to sort of introduce it, I know we're kind of running a little late, but I just want to briefly introduce it because I think people seem to be getting results from it. So if you're interested, I want to let you know about it. And if not, no worries, we'll move straight to the questions. So real quick, to introduce this, I want to explain what Frank Kern calls the 3 rungs of desire. Frank Kern, if you haven't heard of him, he's one of the most famous online marketers. Danny and me were just talking about him. We both learned a lot from him. So he's amazing. So he talks about the 3 rungs of desire. So let's say you're trying to fix a car. The first rung is the bottom one is reading the manual. Like, okay, I'll go get the manual and I'll go to YouTube these days on how to fix my brake pads or whatever. The next step is actually having somebody who knows how to do it come and show you how. And the final step is taking it to Pep Boys or something to do it for you. So often what we want is, in kind of that context, is do it for you. In life, however, as I addressed what Jim Rohn said, you can't have others do your push-ups for you. You got to do it yourself. But you show me how. So instead of providing the manual, what I like to do is actually get the kind of the mix between show me how and do it for me. And I'll explain the do it for me parts as I move through the methodologies real quick on my coaching methodologies. But really, we're going to get one-on-one personal training showing you how to conquer, like to embrace fear, move through it, and create every element of your life through all these strategies and master productivity. Master it. That's the key to success, because as I mentioned right at the start of this webinar, time is your most valuable asset. Once you know how to value that time and master it and put it to use, anything is possible. So to kind of briefly kind of go back to what Jack Canfield, my mentor and amazing author or whatnot, says, that one of all the things successful people do to accelerate their trip down the path to success is participating in some kind of coaching program. And it really is. I'm not just saying this obviously because I'm a coach. I myself actually have a coach, and my coach
have 3 at the moment.
Do you really? Oh wow, okay. That's awesome. What it does, it just gets you out of your own mind, because we're all stuck in our own head, right? So that's what I have a coach myself. She's helping me work through my book and all that stuff. So Danny has one, my coach has one, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really powerful tool to accelerate whatever it is you want to do in your life. So to explain my methodologies real quick, this is what I call the 6 steps to success. First step is we get very clear on what it is you want to create. As I mentioned, if you don't have that clarity, conscious brain is lazy, paradox of choice comes into play, you don't know what you want, nothing gets done. So we get very, very clear on what it is you want to create, what is your purpose, what is your why, that kind of stuff. The next step is we create a very detailed roadmap to your destiny. And what's cool about this is we don't focus on the end, because let's say I want to create a multi-million-dollar empire. It gets kind of scary, right? Like, how am I going to do that? So we have the end result in our mind, but we actually focus on the first step. As I mentioned, in Greenland, I never thought about the end until the very last day. I was just focusing on the next step and getting through that one shift of 1 hour of skiing. So we break it down into small chunks. And that's where preemptive strikes come into play and that kind of stuff. The next step is basically what all the kind of things we've been talking about. That's the psychological paradigm shift, where we're going to get rid of that evolutionary, the evolutionary things that mess us up, and we're actually going to create a psychology that serves us. So that's what that step is all about. The next step is skill mastery. And that's where I'll actually be providing training. This is more sort of in the realm of consulting than coaching, but I do a kind of combination between the both, where we're going to talk about, when I mentioned that do it for you, I'm going to talk about how to actually grow your business. And why I say maybe you're not an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. Danny's an entrepreneur. I believe that entrepreneurship gives you that freedom to do what you want when you want to. I do my business from Mexico, India, Ireland, and New Jersey, so it's cool. So if that's something you want to do, we definitely will. I'll be training you in how to do that in some methodologies that are just masterful, from Brendan Bouchard, Frank Kern, Jeff Walker, some of the best in the industry.
But if not, then there's a lot of, I know a lot of people are like, well, I didn't come here to run my own business. I came here, my kid with Asperger's is 5. He's not going to run his own business. So in that case, there's a lot of other skills, like how to master fear and how to.
Of course.
I mean, the LMNOP thing is a skill, and learning how to think this way is a skill. And pretty much anything is really a skill. So that I think that's really, what he can help with as well.
Totally. No, thanks for clarifying that, Danny. That's what I meant to say. It's like skill mastery and consulting is also in the realm of mastering that mindset, mastering really every area of life. And I'm not saying I know everything about every area of life, but I read, as you can probably tell by the amount of studies I've quoted, I read about a book and a half a week on everything and anything. So I've learned some stuff, and I'm happy to share it with people I work with because they get value from it. So that's what this step is all about. The 5th step is gamification. It's kind of a concept of bringing video game methodologies into life. A lot of big corporates are now employing it in their business because it makes the process fun. It's not a chore, right? So I'll give you an example of this just real quick. One of the people I worked with, what we had him do was put a sort of progress bar on his goals. He actually had a progress bar. He'd keep scratching out and moving up the progress bar. It makes it a little fun, exciting to move up your progress bar like you would in a video game. One thing I used to do when I was first recovering from the alcohol is actually marking X's on my calendar. So that X becomes a sort of game to keep moving. And psychologically, the more X's you see, the more likely you are to keep going with the X's. Yeah. So that's kind of that strategy. And finally, environment expansion. Zig Ziglar, I think. Was it Zig Ziglar? Or no, Jim Rohn. Sorry. Jim Rohn said that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. So this is why Danny and me spend time together, because I get a lot of value from him and it helps me grow. Yeah. So, and this is about look at the environment. What areas of your environment are potentially toxic? what environments and what areas are helping you grow, and we'll expand upon that. So that's
This
what that step is all about. Sorry, go
this
ahead, man.
is so key. Like this and coaching. People always ask, okay, you have Asperger's. How did you get there? Environment and expansion and coaching. That's it. Reading books and stuff helped, of course, but I put myself around the people that had what I wanted. In this case, was awesome life at that point, and I got the coaching to help myself grow to the next level.
Exactly.
Right now, I have a mindset coach, a business coach, and a spiritual coach, and a life coach. So that's 4 guys, actually.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you. I've heard some quote-unquote experts say that it's all in the mind, all that, like environment doesn't matter, it's up to you. And, but the environment makes a huge impact. So
yeah.
We're really going to shape that. And yeah, it's a valuable part of the process. Thanks for that really makes sense, Danny, to have that, the environment and the coaching. So that's what this is all about. And if you're interested, this is kind of how it works. We'll do 3 sessions a month, 45 to 60 minutes. This is one-on-one personal work. Unlimited email contact, so anytime in the day, you have an email question that comes up, shoot me an email within 24 to 48 hours. I'll get back to you, unless I'm on a mountain, of course, but I got no plans to be on a mountain in the next 6 months at least, so no worries there. And and so unlimited email contact, anything that comes up. We'll be working together for 6 months. We do spot coaching in between sessions. So let's say we had a session, something suddenly came up, and you're an anxiety attack, you need some coaching around, boom, we'll do it. We'll do a spot coaching to kind of get you on your way. And between sessions, we'll create action items to drive your projects and your life forward between our standard 3 times a month session. So it'll be once in 10 days. So of course, the question always comes up: what's the investment? So the investment it's $5.95 for a month, or you can do a one-time payment and save $575 and for $29.95. So we'll be working together for 6 months. And this is what we're working together on. So if you've kind of found some of the things valuable in what we talked about, and if you like that plan, that 6-step methodology, I would absolutely love to help you implement that plan. And of course, since this is a very kind of personal one-on-one thing, there's not a whole lot of spots. My practice is pretty much filled up. I've just for Danny created some more space. It's almost like I have a certain amount of hours I like to dedicate to this. So I have 7. Oh, let me talk about the bonuses real quick before I get into it. But just real quick, as I said, I have about 7 spots available for this. So if you're interested, I'll direct you to the right point, and we can get to work on mastering our psychology in our life. So just to go into some of the bonuses, we'll be getting $10,000 worth of marketing training. And where did I get that number? Because I put in $10,000 worth to get the marketing training.
Now, again, the marketing. Again, you're like, okay, even if you're like, why do I need to learn marketing? Why do I need to do this? Marketing, for me, I had to learn it to run the business, of course. But beyond that, that teaches you how other people think, how to get you out there in the world. Good for jobs, it's just great for learning how other people think and expanding your mind about, that's where I learned most of my social skills. And I take a lot of marketing stuff and apply it to life stuff as well. So it is, I love this stuff.
No, and you're totally right. And it basically boils down to psychology. That's, again, what it is.
Yeah.
I call it marketing because I think, it's business. But it really just boiled down to psychology of influence, psychology of self-influence, as also other influence. So you can shift that. Like Danny said, you can use it in all areas of your life. And then there's a $197 Conquer the Clock Time Mastery Program that I've created, and it's not fully ready yet. So when that comes out, you'll get that as a complete bonus as well. And, of course, email access to me, as I mentioned, to answer any questions about personal and business growth. Handheld support to direct you through every step of the journey for the next 6 months. And Danny has been very gracious. You're going to get a free digital copy of Danny and Hayden's Life Propulsion training program valued at $97, and also a bonus 1-hour coaching session with Danny or Hayden valued at $140.
Yeah, we charge $140 an hour, but you can only get us in packages. Right now, our coaching program is $900 for 6 hours. So I believe that's right. I think it's $700 for 6 hours. For all special people. $900 to the public, $700 to our audience. So you can't just hire us for 1 hour. So this is a very rare thing. Life Propulsion, again, it will pair perfectly with this. And You know, legally, I'm not allowed to say this will change your life and it will be amazing. I wish I could, but I can't. So results not guaranteed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, coaching has been the number one thing that has changed my life.
Yeah, totally. So thanks for adding that, Danny, and I really appreciate again your graciousness in giving these bonuses for this. So it's kind of like over like what I guess $12,000 worth of bonuses, and in the end, what I always what I ask my clients and people I work with, and ask myself is, the reason I've invested all this money in this stuff is it's not about cost, it's about value and what's the return on value. So I hope you found this valuable. I'm sure we'll get a lot of value in working together. So just to clarify. There's only 7 spots available, so it's kind of a first come first serve. Whoever's interested, and we'll get started on work together starting September. And if you are interested, I urge you to sign up because I really think there's gonna be a lot of value and a lot of fun working together, getting that gamification stuff going. So I really urge you to sign up at existingtoliving.com/fear. That's where you can enroll for the program. It'll get you going with the whole steps, and we can get working together. I'm really excited. I'm really hoping to interact with some of y'all and work with y'all on a long-term basis to create whatever it is you want to create.
Yeah, and once you enroll, if you forward the receipt or email he gives you saying, hey, here you go, you've enrolled, if you forward that to expert@aspergerexperts.com, if you message us on our Facebook page or something, we'll be able to send you the link, and I'm sure that actually we'll send you it as well. But if you message us that, we'll send you all the details for Life Propulsion and the coaching program. So I'm going to type it in the chat box.
Cool.
.com. So email us there, and then we will give you Life Propulsion as well as the coaching once you sign up for the enrollment thing. You ready to do questions?
Awesome. Yeah, I totally am. I just want to thank everybody for their time. I know we ran a little bit later. Just want to make sure you guys got all that value from it and get all the teaching in. So if you have any questions, this is the time. Shoot, I'm ready whenever you are, Danny.
Okay, so Sue says, can the chant be spelled out?
Sure. How do I don't know how to
if you exit your thing, then you can or you can just tell me and I can type it.
I actually not very sure how to spell it out. I just chant it. But let me type it in. Num-yo. Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, let's open this up. So Num-yo-ho Renge-kyo. There it is.
All right, and you got the
chat.
Yeah, the chat. There you go.
You got that, Danny?
Yes.
Okay, cool. You can also just Google, if you Google Nichiren, like Nicher, the chanting and the process. It's I again find this to be of immense value for me. So this is kind of what I started doing. So yeah, Nichiren Buddhism is that one.
All right. Any more questions? Type them in the box. We're gonna be hanging out here for a few minutes. There are no more questions. Then that was awesome. And tomorrow night, by the way, while I have you all, tomorrow night, another webinar from us. We're going to be talking about healthy living. So you should have gotten an email to that about that. If you're registered, awesome. We will see you tomorrow night. Hayden will be joining us as well. If not, I'm going to probably send out another email tomorrow morning about it. So healthy living tomorrow night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 7:30 Mountain Time, 6:30 Pacific, 8:30 Central, whatever that is in GMT, I do not know. And yeah, so if you're interested, register for that. You should have gotten an email. If not, look for an email from us tomorrow about a healthy living webinar tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Any more questions? Type them in the magical box that says questions. Notification here. So yeah, we're just, we're gonna hang out here. If you have any more questions, we are gonna be here. If not, that's cool too, and we'll end it. I don't see how many people have complained that they can't access the webinar. Yay, cool. We normally get people going, oh my God, I can't access the webinar, but none this time. How did I find my coaches? Annie, I found 2 of them through. Okay, so one of them was actually the receptionist at the college program I went to for people with Asperger's. He introduced me to the mindset guy I have by giving me one of his audios, and then he was in Denver, so I went to one of his events, etc. And then and then the other coaches, I found one of them through Google, just looking up, this is the marketing business guy. I found some of his stuff useful and I hired him. And then the spiritual guy I found via a very spiritual way. Like, it's a very fun story there. Not going to tell it right now, but it was very, the universe is calling to you, coincidence, but coincidences don't happen type thing. So if you'd like, if you want some other coaching recommendations, we have a great coaching program that's gotten amazing results for people. But if you'd like, hey, I want a specific coach to help me with this, then I can probably ask around and find you some good people to work with. I'm sure actually I can as well.
Definitely. Happy to help in any way I can.
So that's kind of how I found my coaches. And that, honestly, if you like read a good book and go, ooh, I like this person, go on their website, see if they have a coaching program. Sometimes they do. And then you can just go on and you start working with them, and they help you out. It's like, hey, I was reading this book from this guy, and now we're talking on the phone once a week. Cool. So some of my coaches have been, let me pay you $500, you coach me. Some have just been a little bit more not monetary based, just kind of like, hey, you're awesome. And just kind of like a mentor type role. And then the spiritual guy, I obviously don't pay him. It's just kind of like, this is what he does for fun. So, yeah, that is how I found my coaches. So, yeah, anything to add to that?
With me, I actually have explored many different coaches, and I totally agree with your, that if you go write like a book, you can go check out the person's website, and they might have a coaching program. And again, I'm not going to name names, but I have done that with some big name coaches, and actually didn't get as much value than having like a sort of smaller coach, because bigger names, you're obviously not going to coach with the big name person. You're going to get one of their like sort of other coaches on their staff, and sometimes it's kind of like a not personalized experience is what my experience of it was. So I went through a coach on a more personal level. She was with one of the training programs I've trained with. I've trained with the program called Accomplishment Coaching, and so I found a coach through that. She actually was somebody I knew, and I knew that it to me was much more personalized than going through a sort of like a big name person and having one of their like staff members type thing coaching me. And I'm not saying it's always going to be the case. That was just my experience. So make of that whatever you will.
Yeah. I kind of have the same experience. Smaller people, better. The only way you're going to get Jack Canfield or Tony Robbins or any of those like big transformation success people to coach you is pay them like $1 million a year. And if that's within your budget, great, go for it. But for most people, they're like, yeah, I don't really have a disposable $1 million a year to hire someone to better my life. So, coaching programs generally run $3,000 and under, is what I've seen. I've seen some that are 10, but mainly $3,000 and under is what is generally the range. Annie asks, what coach is the most valuable to someone specific to Asperger's? That would probably be an Asperger's coach, which we are. Little shameless plug here. Annie, if you email us, expert@aspergerexperts.com on here. If you email us, expert@asperger, expert. If you email us at expert, I typed that in wrong, there's no S, expert@aspergerexperts.com, then we can get on the phone with you and provide you with a little bit of free coaching, 30 minutes or less usually, and then you can determine if you want to hire us or not. But yeah, for someone specific to Asperger's, an Asperger's coach is probably your best bet. Mickey, I am going to be in Phoenix for business, but I'm not really going to be seeing anyone Asperger's related. I'm going to a conference. I'm arriving at 9 a.m. It starts at 10 a.m. and then I'm going through those 2 days, and then I'm leaving like Sunday morning at like 7 a.m. So it's I'm there Friday and Saturday, and I'm leaving Sunday first thing in the morning. So unless I'm not going to be available to like meet for lunch or anything. But just throwing this out here though, you can hire us to come to you and work with you in person, both of us, Hayden and I, for $5,000, and that includes flight and hotel and ground transportation, all that good stuff. So we will come to you for a weekend and work specifically with you. That's really the only way that you can get us in person right now, or through our coaching program on the phone. Okay. And by the way, if you're interested in that and you're like, yeah, I want these guys to come to me, email me, expert@aspergerexperts.com, and we will hook you up. And seriously, like, we will take care of you. So, parent to 12-year-old daughter with Asperger's, when and how is the best way to inform her of her condition? Tiffany, I'm going to give you a link to a blog we posted on just that subject. So give me a second. All right, there it is. Okay, Tiffany, there is the link for you. That is the answer to your question. Should you tell your child that they have Asperger's, and when and how and all that good stuff? We get asked that so much that we made it into a blog post and a video. I think one of the best things doing is actually speaking to parents so we can be good coaches too. I completely agree. We are obviously only two people. We can only do so much. So yeah, any other questions? Otherwise, I think, this is a good place to end it. We'll take 2 more questions. How about that? So if you have more questions, obviously there's a delay, so we're going to wait a few seconds here. But if you have questions, type them in the magical box. Otherwise, yeah, and I highly suggest signing up for the Fear program for coaching with Akshay. It's going to be, I'm honestly like considering it just because I see the value in it. It's good stuff. Any sort of coaching, the difference between a coaching relationship and a regular like therapist relationship is the therapist is you're broken, let's fix you. Yeah. The coach is, what do you want to do in your life? Let's help you get there.
Yeah, it's a really cool actually point to add, Danny, that like in coaching what we focus on is what's right and doing more of it to create the future as opposed to like healing a past. We're not gonna. I've seen some people go to therapy for like 4 or 5 years, they're still kind of working on stuff. We're not. This is about really driving your life and accelerating your life forward. So that's a really good distinction to add. Thanks for that, Danny.
Yeah, totally. Because I see a lot of people go with like a coach. Well, how's this different? And the coaching, that small distinction makes all the difference. Because it's a very unique relationship where you have a person that their sole relationship with you and their sole focus with you is improving your life. That's it. They're not there to be your friend. They're not there to to listen to you. They are there to help you improve your life. That's it. And because of that, they get the results. So it looks like we don't really have any more questions. I'm sure as soon as we get off, there will be more questions, like there always are. But I'm sure if you go to Akshay's website or email us, then you can get in touch with either of us and ask those. So I'm going to put his thing on the screen. That means I have to stop talking.
Yeah, of course. If you got any questions for me, feel free to find my website, existingliving.com/contact, or shoot them to Danny, and if there's anything for me, Danny, let me know, and I'll be happy to send over any answers.
Yeah, will do. So yeah, thank you all so much. Healthy living tomorrow night with really awesome wellness and health coaches, by the way, coaching. And so yeah, we will see you, hopefully we'll see you tomorrow night. I'm going to be sending out an email on that later, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.